Zach, do you prefer a
Hello, and welcome to the MIT STM Systems Thinking webinar series. My name is Naomi Gutierrez, Communications Administrator for STM, and I am today's host. Thank you for joining us. Today's speakers are Emad Zand, Zach Holmes, and Gail Shepard of Microsoft Azure. Emad Zand is an alumnus of the System Design and Management program and now serves as a Principal Program Manager in Microsoft Azure Global. Zach Holmes is a Principal PM lead in Microsoft Azure Global with 20 plus years of experience in software operations, development, and project management. And Gail Shepard is the Corporate Vice President and Head of Global Expansion and Digital Transformation for Microsoft Azure. Among many other responsibilities, Gail develops and leads the teams responsible for Azure's global cloud expansion. Their talk today is titled Managing Large-Scale Cloud Computing Projects, a case study on Azure Shiproom. If you have questions for the presenters, please enter them into the chat window at the side of the video. They will be addressed during the Q&A portion of this session. The recording of this presentation will be available online after today's session, and a link will be sent to all registrants. And Gail, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Naomi. And good morning, good afternoon to everyone. As introduced, I'm Gail Shepard, and my role includes planning and managing the adoption and lifecycle of our cloud regions around the world, as well as developing strategies to support the digital transformation of our emerging markets and supporting special workloads, engineering for special workloads, strategic workloads for our customers, and helping manage some of the most complex engineering projects end-to-end that we have with some of the largest companies and organizations in the world, which is why we're here today talking with you. So let's go to the next slide and talk a little bit about what we see going on in the world. We're going to I apologize for that. We're going to run through an agenda pretty quickly, but if we go to the agenda, let me work on that real quick. I'm going to give a short talk on the future of cloud, some of the trends we're seeing, and the expectations our customers have of our clouds. Emad is going to talk about challenges of managing a large-scale engineering projects for cloud. And then Zach is going to introduce us to what we call the Azure Shiproom and the processes that we use to manage these large complex projects. We're going to wrap up with some tooling and then a Q&A section. Well, I'll be here with you throughout the duration of the talk. Now, moving to those trends, no doubt in the last 2 years, there's been a catalyst for change around the world in every industry. The global pandemic has impacted all of us, from the way we work to the way healthcare is delivered, the way we receive it, the orchestration of demand and supply across every industry, how we manage work-life balance, and more top of mind than ever before in my lifetime, certainly, are the methods in which we shop, we dine, we find entertainment, and engage in our relationships with friends and family. And so to that end, the case for digital transformation has never been more clear or urgent in my mind or your mind. And in order to plan for the systems of the future, and to support this transformation, we need to focus in on current global trends and understand the role that the cloud itself plays in enabling and satisfying some of these trends. So we're going to start first. Hybrid work.
Testing.
And that would be my phone. Trend of hybrid work is probably one that dominates every conversation I'm with individuals. I still apologize for that. So it dominates every conversation that we're in today, which is hybrid work. Global workforces have shaped the concept of systems. This is true. What we found beginning in 2020 and into 2021 is that hybrid work created an evolution of where you work, where you live, no longer matters to what you do. And there's some exceptions to that, clearly. I mean, service employees, it really does matter where you work. But many of us, and most of us in technology, had the opportunity to really enjoy a hybrid work environment. And so that meant that we were going to have to adapt and adjust our day-to-day lives to incorporate work and the personal aspects of our life altogether. In addition to seeing change in how we work and when we work and where we work, we also are asking this very fundamental question as to why we work. And Microsoft tracks world trends and work trends. And one of our index results indicated that 41% of people are thinking about leaving their current employer. Some are thinking about leaving not only their current employer, but the work as we know it today all up. And this leads to two challenges we call the hybrid paradox and the great reshuffle underway. So while 70% of employees want more flexible remote work options, the same numbers say that they want more in-person connection. So there's a conundrum in that answer, and everything is contextual, of course. And so 65% of employees are craving more or less time in person with their teams, which is like really creating a 50-50 split on when we want more time with our teams and when we want more time at work or virtual. And we know that everyone wants more focused work time, but about half say they can accomplish this in the office, while the other half say they can do this by working remotely. And also notable to the other point is that more people are changing jobs than ever before. And a few things are characteristically driving this. One is when it comes to hybrid work, there is no standard, and flexibility will be key. However, productivity and flexibility are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they travel together. And every organization must have a digital fabric for collaboration that brings together both the digital and the physical spaces for employees and customers and supply chain members and partners that we interact with. And strengthening connections between employees and our company's missions, between employees and our managers, empowering employees to ensure their own well-being and exercise their flexibility without sacrificing any career advancement is required more than ever before. The second trend is focused on building a hyper-connected business. And if we consider how we opened this conversation on the global pandemic, impacted all of us, the way we work, the way healthcare is delivered, et cetera, the orchestration of demand and supply across every industry and the way services and goods are delivered, whether they be literally delivered or they be available for pickup in a remote secure space, has changed the way we interact, has changed the way that we live. And so going forward, every business process, all of these business processes changing to accommodate this, will be collaboratively powered by data and AI, and will bridge the digital and the physical worlds. This is a major undertaking by corporations and by governments in order to make these business process changes, as well as to design in the future a data-centric approach supported by machine learning to understand patterns and adapt very quickly to the changing conditions into which people interact with them. The third trend is that every business is becoming a digital business. Every government is a digital government. Every educator is a digital educator. And we have to build our own digital capability. You've seen this in your own universities. And this capability will be of paramount importance to the way we compete, the way we thrive, and the way we survive. This does require, in our humble opinion, the best multi-cloud, multi-edge infrastructure, and it requires that you have the best tooling to support fusion teams across your organization while working together to build new solutions. Computing is becoming more distributed and embedded in the real world than ever before. It's everywhere. It's on our wrists, it's in our cars, our homes, our energy meters, et cetera. And the application models are transforming rapidly to run on the edge with new ambient intelligent capabilities. We will see continued increase in the percentage of industrial control systems, including real-time analytics and AI inference now on the edge, compute on the edge. Students, teachers, data analysts, and scientists have all seen rapid growth on GitHub and creating tools, developer tools, and access to everyone to invent is part of our mission. Low code, no code, and machine learning development platforms are being available to democratize access to invention of new methods and applications. And going forward, I think about governments increasing their spend in digital evolution and increasingly collaborating and coordinating with each other as to lessons learned and how to best accelerate digital adoption. So every organization will need a more distributed, more intelligent, more autonomous computing fabric, one we can use to build rapidly, manage, and deploy applications anywhere and everywhere. And we need tools that bring them together for both pro developer and domain experts. And as important as understanding and driving forward in trends 1 through 3 are, the fourth one, nothing trumps ensuring that protection is front and center in our digital transformation strategy. And that is cybercrime. It is the biggest threat to digital transformation today, and it's the #1 risk facing every business going forward. If you think about the amount of change during the pandemic, the amount of digital transformation that's been underway, it is clear that IT and cyber operations teams have had to go through every business process to ensure remote access is protected. And cybercrime is also costing economies more than $6 trillion each year around the world, and is expected to increase by 2025 to $10.5 trillion. So I'll share with you an example of one of the investments that we are making at Microsoft to protect and defend our customers. We have something called the Microsoft Digital Crimes Unit, also known as a DCU. And it recently announced, and you can see this on our blog, that we disrupted the activities of a China-based hacking group that I refer to as Nickel. Nickel was using websites to attack organizations in the United States and 28 other countries, believed to be used for intelligence gathering from government agencies, think tanks, and human rights organizations. They targeted organizations in both private and public sector. This includes diplomatic organizations and ministries of foreign affairs as well all over the world. Obtaining control of these websites and redirecting traffic from them helped us protect current and future victims and learn more about their activities. So our Threat Intelligence Center has been tracking Nickel since 2016 and analyzing the specific activities since 2019. And as with any observed nation-state actor activity, we notify customers that have been targeted or compromised when possible, providing them with the information they need to help secure their accounts and their information. Nickel's goal was to insert, and I want you to think about this, hard-to-detect malware that facilitates intrusion, surveillance, and data theft. And so sometimes they used attacks that compromise third-party virtual private networks. That these suppliers are stolen credentials from spear phishing and other activities. We have not observed any vulnerabilities in the Microsoft products as part of these attacks, but we were a pioneer in using this legal strategy against cyber criminals and more recently nation-state hackers. And to date, we have exposed through 24 lawsuits, 5 against nation-state actors such as Nickel. We've taken down more than 10,000 malicious websites used by cyber criminals, as well as 600 sites used by nation-state actors. And we've also successfully blocked the registration of 600,000 sites to get ahead of criminal actors that planned to use them maliciously in the future. With all this in mind, it's critical that every organization has comprehensive tools across identity, security, compliance, and privacy, as well as management, and that we need a cross-platform, multi-cloud, zero-trust architecture. So I elaborate there just to stress the importance of cybersecurity in all of our strategies and digital transformation projects. Now, considering, if we go to the next slide, all of these world trends, the cloud industry must rise to meet those needs. And there are a couple technologies I'm sure you're aware of, I'm sure you're very familiar with. I'll run through them very quickly, but there are roughly 5 that I'll point out here. Serverless, first of all, is an empowering capability because now we provide the infrastructure, and it's not serverless, obviously, but it's serverless because developers no longer have to worry about commissioning and how much server they're consuming. It's automatic, it scales automatic, and allows you to start small and scale large. And so it's an enabler for, again, democratization of developers, developer nations, as well as AI and machine learning platforms. Data lakes and governance. Data lakes without data governance are often called swamps, and that's because if you don't know where the data is, you don't know what the data is, and you don't protect the data, it's impossible, almost impossible to access it properly. So the combination of data governance and data catalogs, where we map out where data lives, is part of the great enabler to becoming a data-centric, digital-focused organization. Machine learning and AI, driven towards platforms today to accelerate adoption and reduce dependency on large data science teams, is clearly one of the goals. Perpetuates everything and every application today. We're designing in AI and machine learning as opposed to being something that's appending to an application or a capability. And our capabilities today span things such as designing AI into enterprise systems. Our platforms help use the AI for good, ensure understanding of and how to implement responsible AI, creating societal resilience through understanding of complex diseases like COVID and other complex systems. And of course, designing continuous learning and adaptation for autonomous systems, which leads me to the IoT and the edge. And in the time that I've been working in the IoT and the edge, and particularly with machine learning platforms, one of the major changes that's occurred is that we now have compute at the edge. We now have inference at the edge. We now have decision-making at the edge. And so that's one of the more profound things that will continue to advance over the next few years. And then finally, vertical integration. All of these things actually need to integrate together if you look at the four preceding items. But also, each industry that we serve requires strong specialized cloud players and developing specific industry-specific clouds. And examples in our world include healthcare and energy and financial services, public services, and more, where the combination of the power of Microsoft's platform, along with the power of our independent software vendors, our global system integrators, and other members of the ecosystem come together to serve an economy, an industry, and a region of the world. So going to the next slide, you can see here our platform. It's the Microsoft Cloud. You have your industry clouds on the top side. Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability encompasses all of those clouds and is the basis for which we, as we're designing and planning clouds and working with governments and going through our process of that design, build in sustainability metrics and measures for not only meeting government objectives, but our own Microsoft objectives. So starting with customers and industry clouds is the beginning. In the middle, you see key components of the Microsoft infrastructure that we provide. When Emad talks and when Zach talks, working across these systems and providing complex engineering services to support their integration is a big part of what we do in Azure and the cloud and AI team. And then finally, just a quick look at some components of the Microsoft Cloud on the next slide. So if we look for the components that are here, I won't read them all to you, but basically what we provide is a trusted and comprehensive cloud that serves our enterprise customers, unicorns, and emerging markets. And you can tell by the tools that are here from Microsoft 365 and our Dynamics, which are enterprise-wide tools, to GitHub, which serves our developers, to the Microsoft Power Platform, which is data and AI-centric, to the components of the Microsoft Azure platform itself. These are all things that are combined together, provide a tremendous empowering capability for our customers. These tools, these capabilities are built on trust and security with business model alignment, and they also are supporting the Microsoft industry clouds that we saw on the prior slide. Now, Microsoft's mission is to ensure that every person and every organization in the world can achieve more. And so that requires a cloud that's everywhere, which is part of my team's mission. Today, we're in 63 regions and growing. We have over 160,000 miles of fiber and subsea cable and 170 plus edge sites, providing and ensuring that Microsoft actually is the largest cloud footprint in the world. And then finally, in conclusion, as we work with the largest customers and companies and organizations in the world, that includes our ecosystem partners and co-innovators and more, there's a certain amount of things that customers are looking for. And these 6 things are here: a cloud that's everywhere, a cloud that's feature complete, that's proven in a safe bet, has a rich ecosystem, is a partner, and has a multi-cloud or many single cloud capability. So customers want these 6 capabilities. They enable them to set and meet their own sustainability goals. Also, we provide them with tools in addition to designing clouds in for sustainability goals. We provide tools to our customers to track their carbon footprint across all of their operations, which becomes important to them as ESG becomes more and more significant in their fiscal and financial reporting, both up to the SEC and to their shareholders. And it's critical that the Microsoft Cloud helps orchestrate heterogeneous digital investments across every layer of the tech stack. And with this said, I'm happy to introduce you to Emad, who's going to talk to us about how the heck we bring together the challenges of managing large-scale projects here at Microsoft, and then Zach will follow with the actual orchestration of that. So here we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. In the previous section, Gail touched upon the cloud war trends and the implications on cloud computing technical trends and what customers expect from the cloud. As the customer requirements become more complex and the scale of cloud computing projects grows, the management of these cloud projects becomes even more challenging. And in this section, I will cover some of the common challenges in managing larger scale projects based on our learning in Microsoft. Next slide, please. The first challenge is keeping the project goals aligned with the corporate goals. Business environment is fluid, and even with the rigorous project planning, there's always a potential for shift in business priorities. While aligning the project planning cycle with corporate planning cycle helps reduce the churn in project planning. As project managers, it's important to build flexibility in the program to be able to adapt to change and be able to steer the program in the new direction that the business requires. Next slide, please. Another challenge in managing large scale projects is managing the scope. When we bring a small number of well-defined requirements, we get more out of our engineering teams compared to the scenario where we bring many requirements that are either not clearly defined or communicated ahead of time or receive commitments from the engineering teams. Right-sizing the scope becomes even more difficult, taking into consideration that different teams have different capacity to deliver. For example, a large team may have the capacity to deliver 2 engineering asks in a 90-day milestone, but a smaller team can only deliver only 1 of the 2 engineering asks in the same period. As project managers, we need to find the right balance across all teams. It's also important to note that project management team itself has limited capacity. As the number of requirements go up, it shouldn't be a surprise that the level of pressure on the project management team, who are ultimately responsible for driving the program, will go up as well. We go to the next slide, please. The next challenge is managing dependencies. When dealing with hundreds of services across thousands of engineering deliveries, managing dependencies can become a daunting task. Dependencies that are not identified during the planning cycle can potentially become a blocker during the execution phase and causing the delivery dates to slip. Sometimes dependencies that are identified at the planning phase, but not delivered according to the plan, again, causing final delivery date to slip. As an example, when the data center construction of a region is delayed, it pushes the date for build out of the cloud services in that region and ultimately the launch of that region. If you go to the next slide, please. Another challenge is in managing larger scale and cloud computing project is related to how we design and implement the engineering requirements. When dealing with an engineering requirement across hundreds of services, it's important to define a set of guiding design principles to arrive at the common pattern that these 100 services can plug into. Even when there is a common pattern, delivering a service level ask can still be expensive from engineering resources standpoint because it requires that requirement to be implemented by hundreds of services. When possible, we should invest in the platform and build the capability once and let other services benefit from it. This modular approach to design is aligned with the cloud-native architecture principles, where functionalities are broken down into microservices and then containerized. This model allows each microservice to handle one specific function very well, instead of expecting each service to replicate the same function. A good example would be supporting certificate auto-rotation, where one entity can provide the new certificates and other services can subscribe to it. Cloud computing, next slide, please. Cloud computing projects also require mature engineering processes to safely deploy software and hardware across multiple cloud environments, including commercial and sovereign cloud, to ensure that we are not causing any outages, not creating any regressions, and ensuring that we have functional parity across all the environments. Project managers of cloud computing projects should incorporate in their plan that it's in certain times of the year, such as holiday season or tax season, safe deployment measures may not be guaranteed. And as a result, the new engineering functionalities may not be able to be delivered to the end customers. Can we go to the next slide? Project managers of cloud computing projects also need to manage risk throughout the life cycle of the project. There are many different definitions of risk depending on the context. A project management body of knowledge guide, also known as PMBOK guide, which is a collection of standards and best practices published by the Project Management Institute, define risk as an uncertain event that when it occurs can have a positive or negative impact on the project outcome. We often associate risk with the negative outcome. If you are wondering about the positive risk, think of a situation that the release of a new software build-out automation technology can save time and accelerate the delivery schedule of the new cloud region. Project managers should identify the sources of risk early on, identify the severity of each source of risk and the dynamics between each risk. And based on that, they need to come up with a risk response strategy. The risk response strategy can be different depending whether you're dealing with a positive risk or a negative risk. And they need to ensure that they have a tracking mechanism in place to be able to correct the course and ensure that there is no deviation from the set targets. And of course, throughout the whole process of risk management, it's important to have an effective communication process in place and be able to communicate effectively with the stakeholders. Later in the presentation, we talk more about the communication aspect and how we do risk management in the Azure Shiproom. Thank you. Finally, as the scale of cloud projects increase over time, there is a need to build also a scalable project management tools and processes. For example, when dealing with hundreds of services across thousands of engineering requirements, we need to be able to ensure the status is accurately captured so that we get the right visibility into the progress and be able to identify potential issues. To be able to scale, investing in automation is very important, and the status of requirements should be based on automated telemetry rather than based on self-attestation. Another factor that helps with scaling is leveraging the tools and processes that project stakeholders are familiar with and reduce the cognitive load on the project stakeholders. An example of a process-related scaling challenge is managing the scope and dependencies. To be able to manage the scope and dependencies at scale, here at Microsoft, we capture all asks in Azure DevOps, and we use a dependency tracker tool for managing dependencies. Both Azure DevOps and dependency tracker tools are familiar tools inside Microsoft for our project stakeholders. Finally, as the number of products in the scope and requirements increase over time, risk management is also becoming more challenging. And as we will cover later in the tooling section, we had to invest in our analytics tooling to be able to identify project risk in a more effective way. This concludes my section on some of the common challenges in managing large-scale projects. I would like to now hand it over to Zach to talk about Azure Shiproom and how it can be used as a blueprint for managing large-scale cloud computing projects. Zach?
Thank you, Emad. So as you'll see here, I've actually referenced the scale as hyperscale. I know the talk is about large scale, but you'll see soon why I look at this project as kind of on the extreme end of a large scale. So thanks for having me. I will take us straight in to an introduction of what is Azure Shiproom. So let's talk about that briefly. It's a tightly coordinated project management program. It basically takes the pieces of all project management, people, process, technology at an enterprise scale, meant to deliver a very this concise but large set of asks across a vast cloud set of cloud resources. So let's talk a little bit about what that scope means. Within Microsoft Cloud, we have 24 engineering organizations working towards the common goal of delivering these services. Within scope of this project, I'm going to walk you through as a part of the Azure Shiproom, 885 products and services encompassing 16,000 engineers. As Gail referenced, we have 63 and growing regions, 5 clouds, and this covers 24 months and 12 milestones. Within that time period, we've delivered over 24,000 discrete, specific engineering deliverables. And our success rate has consistently met over 90% at the end of each milestone. And as items that come in slightly after the end of the milestone land, we've achieved well over 97% success against our stated goals. So overall, this process and program of delivering at, as I referenced, hyperscale delivery and cloud, when we look across all software projects, this would easily be the largest distributed software project ever successfully undertaken. So again, thanks for having me here. I'll jump straight into, first, let's talk about the foundational principles that we built this program on. Initially, we basically come in with a centrally coordinated and federally executed system. If you reference back to my previous slide, 16,000 engineers is well beyond any reasonable span of control. So by coordinating as a central function, we create clarity and ensure that we have everyone working towards the stated goals. This goes back to Emad's initial slide around direction, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second. But we empower people across all of our organizations to be successful in delivering towards that common goal. The main way we do this, and I'm going to jump a little bit ahead to the bottom of the slide and then I'll come back, is by creating clarity. That's going to be the common theme you hear from me throughout my section of the presentation, is in order to deliver at hyperscale or any large scale project across complex ecosystems and teams, you must focus your energy first off the bat on creating clarity with all participants. That empowers them to be a part of a team that delivers rather than feeling they are disenfranchised or disconnected from the project or have differing goals. Again, how do we do that? Multiple tiers of consistent two-way communication. It's vital that we ensure that that two-way communication is occurring, that we have positive ACK and an understanding between the executors in a given scenario and the coordination team. And that is consistent. We continually improve that. We take feedback and we continue to loop through to ensure clarity is always gained for each scale of the project. How do we do that? First of all, formal, very open postmortems, and ensuring that we have a great feedback process and we recognize any system improvements that we can make, both to people, processes, and technology, and define those as work items and have a very rapid iterative process to fix problems as they occur, so that we can continue to focus back on maintaining that clarity. And this ties into our software, which Emad's going to talk us through quite a bit after my section, but data-driven rapid software iteration empowers that federated point of contact to easily manage their delivery. And again, this allows them to be able to be empowered to deliver without having to constantly come back to that central role. One of the principles that we defined early on is we're goal seeking with no exception process. I.e., what I mean by that is, in order for a specific deliverable to achieve a green state in our tracking, we focus on a state and date philosophy, in that the state is binary. You've either achieved it or you have not. And when we talk about achieving an engineering deliverable or goal, we talk about in reference to the customer. So our goal is not that the developer has written the code, but actually the actual code or service or improvement or feature has been rolled out to our customers and they are receiving that value. State and date means that you can have binary state as I just referenced. You can enhance that to a status for our reporting by putting a date in. And as we are milestone driven, we work on a principle of if it's going to land within that milestone, it is yellow. If it's outside that milestone, it's orange. That allows for the next point of embracing and encouraging hard engineering and prioritization conversations. As I mentioned, we have not achieved 100% across this milestone. We have achieved a very significant success rate, but software is often difficult. Large projects have many competing priorities. And so what our systems and people and our processes allowed is to have the right conversations about items that were not going to land in a stated schedule so we could mitigate that risk or pivot resources to achieve that goal within that time period. And again, going back to state and date, no exception process and embracing those hard conversations about both the engineering and the priorities, that really is the key to our having achieved success here. All of this builds on top of Microsoft's leadership principles. Coming back to my common theme you'll hear is creating clarity is the path to success in any endeavor. Creating clarity helps generate energy across the team. It helps empower people to do their best work. And as a result, we drive to results and we are able to deliver results. I'll move us forward I'm going to talk a little bit about each of the challenges that Emad enumerated for large scale projects. So when we talk about keeping project and corporate goals aligned, one of the first, as I mentioned, crisply defining those goals and being goal oriented was one of our first kind of stated intents as we kicked off this project. And this is not just about organizational leaders and the corporate leaders. This is about every individual involved in the process, going back to those 16,000 engineers. If we have crisply defined goals, and that creates clarity for everyone involved, and we're far more likely to deliver successfully. Communication channels. Again, back to creating clarity. We established communication channels right off the bat. We also built into those postmortems anytime we saw a disparity in communication or an area we could improve, to have those hard conversations up front and fix those challenges so that the teams involved continue to feel fully invested and empowered in this process. We gained explicit buy-in from all stakeholders. This is, one of our key points is going back to all of our stakeholders, ensuring that the goals that we've defined are understood and having those hard conversations up front with the stakeholders to ensure we understand where their priorities lay and where our priorities align with those. Rather than leaving things to move forward with assumptions or implicit agreements, we made it explicit from the start, and that helped us ensure everyone is aligned with the same goals. We revisited those goals and commitments in a very tight engineering loop. We set up consistent, regular cadences of meetings with every level of execution up to our corporate vice president level. We had weekly meetings at the executive vice president level, and part of the intent of each of those meetings was to consistently revisit those goals and commitments so that everyone continued to hear that mantra of what we are focusing on delivering, and any disparity in priorities could be addressed early and negotiated through before it became a challenge for the project. This takes me into managing scope. Again, creating that clarity very early, we defined and documented each dimension's scope. When I say dimensions, I'll give you some examples. Dimensions are the services that are in a given scope for delivery, the regions, and many of these are time-bound entities as well, where we would say that we would roll out to all regions as an end state, but we had high priority regions based on specific customer needs or specific workload needs. So again, we defined those early, we gained agreement with the stakeholders who owned each of those dimensions, and we documented it in a very clear, accessible and understood location. We validated the business case for each scope boundary. This made sure as we were defining that scope, we were rooting that in our customers' needs and those requirements rather than making arbitrary decisions on what the scope boundaries were for a given time period. This is basically asking why over and over again so that we're very clear on the reasons and the business cases that we set a given scope boundary. We gain explicit buy-in from dimension owners. Again, I referenced this in the first one. Explicit, make sure that we have those hard conversations early and ensure everyone has full clarity on what we're trying to achieve and why we're trying to achieve it. Back to the business case. We codified that scope into tooling. Emad's going to talk more about this shortly, so I won't go too deep into it. This is really that evolution from people to process to technology, which is an iterative loop as well. Talk some more about that, but to deliver at the scales we're delivering at, we had to leverage our technology, and we had to do that in a very quick and efficient way that's well understood by all. We created lightweight yet auditable governance processes for scope changes. So this goes back to the first point, bullet 1 and bullet 2. We need to document the dimension scope, and we need to ensure we document any changes in that, and we need to understand why a change was made. So if the business case changes and we change our scope on any one of those dimensions, we needed a way to achieve that quickly to ensure we maintain clarity as we evolved very rapidly in this project. We right-sized the resources to scope. We looked at the amount of delivery that needed to land in a given dimension, whether that be services, clouds, regions, whatever that dimension be, and we ensured that it was properly staffed and had the right resources allocated to it to be able to deliver successfully. And we expanded scope as business needs required. We started this process over 2 years ago in a very focused area around some of our key government customers, and we continued to evaluate how to expand the scope as our business is growing and our strategic customers had needs that were very similar or aligned with the government needs. Take us forward. So managing dependencies. Front load planning upfront to, again, define that scope and to ensure also the dependencies around that scope are fully documented. As Emad stated, we have systems that we use specifically within Microsoft to help document and maintain clarity around what those dependencies are. The cloud ecosystem that we run at Microsoft and in Microsoft Cloud is obviously very complex. It is very dynamic and is evolving over time. So we did our initial identification of and documentation of those dependencies. I'll say we iterated through that consistently as well, so that we did not miss additional services or regions or any other dimension that had become a dependency between the initiation of a given milestone and the end. We looked at those dependencies in a way that we ensured that they both considered architectural constraints. And that could be something as simple as where is a given service running that is a dependency of an actual offering for our customers from a technical and architectural standpoint. And we also ensured that we considered the customer experience when we built that dependency map. And so that we don't run into latency issues across speed of light between regions, so that we are able to deliver a given customer scenario in a cloud that has potentially less network connectivity intentionally because of its business need than some of our public clouds. And we, again, documented those and worked with the owners of each of those dependencies to ensure they're fully aware and had clarity around why they were in scope as a dependency and what we were trying to achieve. And going back to tooling, we codified it into our project tooling, created dependency map and layers of dependencies into our tooling so that we had clear definition and goals for each involved party. Getting the right design and implementation. I think this is a very critical piece, not only for running a project focused on a given set of deliveries, but even more so for the long-term viability of a given software offering or a cloud all up. So right off the bat, we built a dynamic and creative V-team. We wanted to ensure that all voices and viewpoints were heard so that we did not find ourselves in groupthink around how a given ask should be delivered or designed, but rather we came up with the best possible design. We began with clarity of requirements. As PMs, I think this is the most critical point you can make, is ensure your requirements are completely understood and very clear to all parties involved. This allows everyone involved in that process of design and implementation to bring their best possible and most creative thinking, because they understand the end goal that needs to be achieved for our customers, and they're able to break away from paradigms that may be from the past into a much more clean and smooth solution. As part of that, we avoided bespoke delivery. We up-leveled wherever possible. Emad mentioned this a little bit about cloud native, and he will go into a little bit more, but we up-leveled to universally applicable solutions. In some cases, that meant scaling out requirements where necessary, and some of that were very pragmatic decisions about the time frame and the scope. But our goal, it was not to deliver at a service level with hundreds of services involved wherever possible. The goal is on platform level delivery. This is also an iterative process around taking work that had to be delivered at the service level initially for pragmatic reasons, and bring that back into our backlog and our future state of what Azure and Microsoft's cloud looks like, so that our platform continues to evolve and we become more and more, as built on a cloud native architecture, so that the scale out, massive scale or hyperscale of this project is not something we have to continue to repeat, because our platforms are able to deliver in a much more rapid manner in a way that all services consuming that platform achieve the same goals. So let me take us to this one. So risk management. This is obviously a huge part of any project. And I'll reference back to the point I had made earlier, is we coordinated the strategy centrally, but we allowed teams to plan at the level of execution. So this is that central coordination, federated execution. This allows for teams to implement their own risk management around their specific teams, their specific services, and their specific business. But it also allows, with that coordination centrally, for us to understand the risk landscape across the entire project and to roll that up to the right level of decision maker to help mitigate those risks. Plan for contingencies right off the bat. And we'll talk about one of the unexpected contingencies down at the bottom of the slide. But asking what could go wrong and coming up with a plan before it does is a huge part of risk management. Going into projects like this with a high degree of pessimism and concern is not a bad thing. It allows you to think out of the box and be ready for when things go sideways. So having a plan B or beyond is critical for success of any large project. Dissemination information, i.e. great communication. It really allows for tactical changes at that level of execution I referenced that can mitigate risk rapidly and allow teams to be much more dynamic in how they adapt to changing environments, while still also moving the strategy forward. So back to that centrally coordinated strategy. And if teams are fully informed, again, referencing my central theme, they have full clarity on the goals we're trying to achieve, they're able to be much more dynamic and adapt their tactical execution plan based on new information, new data, or an environmental change. Lastly, and I've referenced this before as well, but it's very critical, is embrace feedback and hard conversations. You check your assumptions and fearlessly evolve. This is part of that contingency planning, but it goes beyond that. This is a very dynamic business. And obviously, even within the span of a milestone, which is approximately 60 days, things can significantly change. And teams who are seeing how well are the flaws of things running on the ground have great feedback and often have found ways to solve problems themselves. So if you want to leverage the incredibly diverse and dynamic creative viewpoints across an entire project, you've got to embrace feedback. You've got to solicit it. You got to have those hard conversations up front. The point I have below here is on 3/1/2020, we moved from a very advanced collaborative environment called the Cloud Collaboration Center. It is a very, almost looks like NASA, command control or NORAD. Conference rooms, we took over an entire set of conference rooms for office hours. We had all teams engaged. We catered food. We brought everyone together to focus on a common goal. It delivered flawlessly and was a very coordinated effort. To everyone obviously knows what happened on or about 3/1, depending on where you live. We all moved to the remote work environment, and we shifted that entire physical presence that was so powerful for collaboration across thousands of engineers to a virtual presence or remote workplace. I will say that we had not specifically planned for that contingency when we started this project, but because we had all of our people bringing their A game and well-informed on what we were trying to achieve, we actually did not skip a beat. We still delivered in that milestone. We shifted to remote work on everything that we had committed to, and we're very successful. So this is, again, basically harnessing the power of everyone involved in the project to figure out new items that come in, like the global pandemic that arrived in early 2020. Last thing I will say, and this is really building up to a theme, and Emad will take us further into the technology part. I think about everything as an evolution from people to process to technology. Sorry, my light just went out in here. I haven't moved enough to keep the conference room on. But that is also iterative. People are the reason that we create great technology. It's their process to work through hard problems, to build technology that empowers them to scale up to that, allowing them to then go tackle the next challenge. It's that people and process and technology iteration that allows you to continue to scale. So by saying we build on a foundation of technology, I don't want to downplay the incredible importance it is to have great people, to allow them to bring full experience and creativity into the project, and to have a very strong voice in how we move things forward, and building a process so their feedback goes back into that technology, and we continue that cycle and continue to scale up to larger and larger and more successful projects. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Emad to take us through the Azure Shiproom tooling.
Thank you, Zach. And now that Zach talked about the Shiproom, let me walk you through some of the tools that we use in Azure Shiproom for managing large-scale cloud computing projects. If we go to the next slide, please. The first piece is the service level ask dashboard that, as Zach mentioned, we have some service level asks, requirements that needs to be implemented across hundreds of services. This is a dashboard that we use to track those requirements. This dashboard is based on a grid structure where the rows represents the products that are in a scope, and the column represents the service level ask requirements. And the dashboard shows the status of a product against a service level ask in a cell at the intersection of the row and column representing that product and that service level ask. Engineering team can double click on a cell, see who's the owner of this requirement, what is the SLA date, i.e. the due date for that delivery, how their status is calculated. They can provide notes, they can provide ETA, and they can figure out, as I said, they can figure out how their status has actually been calculated. The status of the product is generally produced programmatically, as I mentioned, from the telemetry coming from the platform. This dashboard comes with some native filtering capabilities, obviously, for the users, for the program managers to be able to slice and dice this information. Users can export this information to dashboard. They can export the information of this dashboard to Excel for further analysis. And all the information in the dashboard is also available in a Kusto cluster so that program managers and other users can basically develop their own custom query. We also developed the capability of look ahead to enable service teams, engineering teams, be able to see the status of the products that are not in a scope at the current milestone, but will become in the scope in the future as a means to help them in their planning process. Next slide, please. The second tool is the platform as dashboard. Zach talked upon basically having some requirements that requires having some requirements for platform investment. These are generally requirements that involve a very small number of services. Again, this dashboard follows the grid structure where the rows represents the platform asks and the column represents the geographical deployment. And the dashboard shows the status of a platform ask against the required geographical deployment in a cell at the intersection of a row and column representing that platform ask and geography. Again, like the service level ask dashboard, engineering team can double click on a cell to provide the ETA for their engineering deliveries, as well as notes for providing more description. Next slide, please. To help identifying project risk, we developed two pieces of software, Trend View and Analytics Dashboard. In this slide, the trend, as you can see, the Trend View, it provides historical trend information and projections based on the current trend. Can we go to the next slide, please? The Analytics Dashboard helps the program managers further drill down and identify risk areas that the project needs attention. They can see how the trend has shifted in a given period, how a given service level ask is progressing, how a given product is doing against the requirements in a given milestone, and how the status has changed in a given period. The last piece of software that we developed is the Scrum View. We usually use this tool to track the deliverables of each organization in the last week of milestone. The view can pivot based on the service level ask and the organization. On the top side, you see the pivot based on the service level ask, which shows for a given service level ask, how many items each organization have in progress. And if they expand that, they can see the actual products and their status for those organizations. In the lower one, you see the organization pivot, where we see for a given organization, how many items are in progress for each of the service level asks. Again, if they double click, they can see the individual service level asks and the status of the products in progress. Next slide, please. Now I would like to briefly talk about the technical implementation of our tooling. Obviously, our software needs to allow us to scale to any number of teams, any number of services, and any level of reporting. Starting from the left to right, we see the users making HTTP requests in their browsers, and we route the UI-based requests to Azure CDN for serving static content. Since our user base is growing and spread out across the globe, we use Azure CDN for better responsiveness. The requests that rely on the business logic are routed to a traffic manager and served from microservices that are containerized and run on Kubernetes clusters managed by Azure Kubernetes Service. This helps us to become fully agile in our development efforts. And as you can see, we have adopted ourselves the cloud native architecture principles. We use Azure Cosmos DB for our backend. It gives us scalability, high availability, and multi-tenancy. And as you can see, we also have our design also supports for disaster recovery. If our primary region goes down, we can route the traffic to the secondary region without any disruption. This concludes my presentation, and I would like now to open for Q&A.
Thank you so much for that talk, all three of you. I thought it was fascinating. It looks like we do already have one question that came in on the chat panel, and people should feel free to continue to ask. This question is from Munish K. How are the dashboards updated? Is there an automated process to get these insights?
Very good question. I can take that. Basically, as I mentioned, the dashboards are updated. As I said, the status that are reflected in the dashboard is coming from the platform, is based on the telemetry coming from the platform. So it's very event driven. So basically, as soon as, let's say, the status of a service level ask against the product changes, basically that is being reflected in the dashboard. And service teams basically can see it instantaneously.
Yeah, and I'll add to that as well. Is if you remember when I was saying we talked about state and date, And what Emad is talking about is the state, and that is a programmatically derived state from telemetry. From a project management standpoint, the federated model of individuals providing dates in for anticipated delivery of when we should expect to see that status change from red to green via programmatic implementation is coming from our federated kind of project management team.
Thank you both for that answer. While we wait for a couple of more questions to roll in, I was curious, you spoke a fair bit about the importance of embracing feedback and having hard conversations, Zach, and I'm curious about how you foster both within your team of PMs, but also with their reports as well, a culture where people do have freedom to say no and freedom to push back and freedom to ask for further support.
That's a great question. I would say at one fundamental level, this is a cultural kind of view that we're embracing at Microsoft, a growth mindset around ensuring we have, relevant, actionable, but focused feedback and conversations about what is working and what isn't. So I'm building on top of a very strong culture of that. I explicitly set up forums to elicit that feedback as well. And I set some ground rules. I'm going to use one example. I do a retrospective or an after action review at the end of every milestone. And the ground rules for that are that there is no direct response to any feedback expected, i.e. there's no pushback at all. That is not the intent. It's really around to enumerating through everything that went well as things that did not. We do have conversations to make sure we have clarity on what exactly the feedback is, but I make it very clear up front, this is not a point in time where a team that's receiving feedback is going to litigate that feedback. We log that as an action item and then have follow-up conversations to ensure that it's really well understood. And again, I'll say I have a little bit of an easy job in that because we are and have built a very strong culture at Microsoft that allows people to feel comfortable providing that direct feedback, both up and down the chain as well as peer-to-peer across organizations.
That's really great to hear. I know that management tools are very important, management principles are very important, but there's so much that is, even in a cloud-based software-driven environment, it's still about the human element, and you're still dealing with people who are creating all of those things.
Absolutely.
It looks like we are at 1:01 and we don't appear to have any more questions coming in on the chat panel. So I will take this opportunity to thank you all once again for joining us. Thanks to the audience for attending this webinar. Again, the presentation recording will be available online after this session. This is the last Systems Thinking webinar of the year, and we will send out more information in the new year about future webinars. Thank you once again to Emad, Zach, and Gail for speaking today. And on behalf of the System Design and Management Program, thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.